In the middle of the 60s, urban renewal was something that was starting in certain cities in the country. Peoria, Illinois had it. Sioux City had a little bit of it. Green Bay, Wisconsin, I believe, had done some urban renewal. We didn't know too much about this concept, but I mentioned Dale Ball. He had come in from Fremont and bought out the old City National Bank in Council Bluffs, changed the name to First National Bank. And he was a very, very active person. He was just full of ideas, and a lot of people didn't think too highly of some of his ideas, but I thought he was really a very progressive fellow, and which he was. He might have been a little ahead of his time, but he certainly was a very progressive fellow. Anyway, he presented this one day to urban renewal. We were talking about gaining more parking places, and we thought this is what he'd called a group of us together to discuss. And he brings up this urban renewal. He'd been investigating this, and so he talked about how the government comes in and they buy your property, they give you a fair price for your property, and they relocate you in case you want to be in another location, and they more or less pay the bill, or it sounded like it at the time, and going to redo the city. Well, Council Bluffs was an old city. Council Bluffs followed the cow path. It was if you see a picture of Council Bluffs back in the 1850s, it was the same cow path, more or less, that Broadway eventually became. Broadway, and it followed there and curved around there, and so this sounded good to those of us that were in the retail business in downtown Council Bluffs. Man, we're gonna really have something in this town, right uptown, you know. And already shopping centers were taking hold. Council Bluffs was way behind on this. Nobody, and Council Bluffs didn't have a shopping center, and the closest thing, well, Omaha was around 1960. The Crossroads came up, and already the late 60s, the West Roads was being talked of, and I didn't know too much about shopping centers myself. I knew they were happening around the country, but I couldn't conceive of them taking over the downtown, which was about to happen completely. So this urban renewal went on, and we'd have meetings on it, and it went on, and nobody paid attention. I says, well, it's going to happen. It is definitely going to happen. I says, we're continually, and it just takes time. And I was on this committee, and we would continually meet, and I would tell people, well, I don't know what is going to happen, but something is, and we keep going along. And finally, out of nowhere, I think it was in October of 1972, or maybe the summer of 1972, that they talked about maybe a little bit before that, but anyway, they sent a letter out, and the different property owners, the urban renewal was getting closer, and that they sent a letter to our store. I think that they wanted us to vacate that store and get ready for a going out of business sale or doing something for our location within the next few months, and that they wanted us out of there by the first of the year. That would be the first of January or so of 1972. And so in 1971, about in October, I'm a year behind. It would be 1973 that we had to be out of there. It would be 1973. So in about October of 1972, our store, we hired a firm to help us have a big going out of business sale. The whole store. Now, at that time, that my father had passed away, and October of 1969, and my mother passed away in March of 1973. So I was the only one, I was left there, and Les Krasny was left, and Millard and Bob, cousins, and we each, our store was a very peculiar store the way it was run. We each owned our own individual departments. It was almost like a shopping center. Millard and his son Bob ran the men's clothing department and ladies ready-to-wear department, and Les ran men's furnishings and piece goods, and Millard also controlled the shoe department, although later he leased that out, Millard and Bob. In the meantime, Bob had got a Honda dealership and was operating that also, selling motorcycles, and called it People's Motors. And then he, in the meantime, when we had Urban Renewal, they decided not to go into any more retail in the store, and they were going to go out. So Millard was going to retire at the time, and Bob then ran. He got the Honda car dealership as well as the motorcycle dealership, and that's another story. But he had it for a short time, and then the oil deal came, and people were going for small cars, and they were trading in their big cars, and he couldn't get rid of them. But anyway, that was a short-lived deal with Bob having the Honda car dealership, and then he eventually moved to El Paso, Texas, and was very successful down there in the parts distribution. Anyway, Les was wanted to stay in some kind of business, Les Krasny, and I was going to then go into a big hardware store. I mean, I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I did get when I was out of business for a short time, we had this going out of business sale, and they demolished the store in no time at all. We finally got out of there the first part of February of 1973, and within 2 weeks they were tearing down Broadway in Concha Bluffs, and literally started practically with our store. We all owned other properties there, of which the city bought, and paid a fair price at the time for those different properties. And they literally put every little merchant out of business at the time with this urban renewal. And then Dale Ball couldn't get a developer, and he ended up forming his own construction company and building the shopping center in downtown Concha Bluffs. And he had his main tenants Sears and Phillips from Omaha, Henry Greenberg, and Brandeis at the time. Brandeis, of course, eventually sold out to Yonkers, and they ran it for a short time, and then they closed their store, and eventually the whole shopping center went out. And Les did put a store in there, and didn't do very well with that store, and he wasn't the large store there anymore, because the other were department stores, and that Les just put in a men's store, and it was just another store. And the shopping center never took off. The shopping center itself never took off, and eventually it went under, and as a shopping center, and a real estate developer took it over, and it's kind of become an office park, and I think it's doing okay today. But there's no retail left in it. So downtown Concha Bluffs has literally no retail. Every store is gone, but it's just because they built a new shopping center of Mall of the Bluffs, and then around by Lake Manawa, there's another one that the big box stores has Walmart and Menards and Home Depot and lots of restaurants. and that's where the retailing is today. But getting back to our story of going out of business, we had a going out of business sale. It went on through the fall and through Christmas and ended up about on February the 1st. And at the time, I had Ben Selden, who was in the real estate business, and that was Millard and Ted's father. He was a progressive fellow, and I attribute him for doing, putting me back into business more or less. So anyway, in the summer of '71, he was practically the only realtor in Council Bluffs that grabbed a hold of this urban renewal, and he started looking for locations to move into, and I was not particularly interested, but he kept coming to me and said, the only thing I can see is this place in West Broadway. And so Millie and I bought this, start buying a couple pieces of property with him on 29th and Broadway, and it was a really bad-looking property, and we were going to build a big True Value hardware store, because that was a business that I know. Even though we were in the department store, I was in the hardware house where we had the appliances. We were General Electric dealers, originally Westinghouse, Philco, and we were big in guns and sporting goods also. And we were going to build a big True Value hardware store. And I couldn't decide for sure whether I wanted to do it. It was going to take a lot of money. And Bob, my cousin, who built this dealership, he'd gotten money through a small business loan. And I wanted to get one of those loans. It was a direct loan. It wasn't through the banks like they were doing, and it was a direct loan. And they apparently had quit doing them. And I fiddled around with that thing for about a year, and getting them, and my accountant and a lawyer, and I kept having to go to Des Moines, and was trying to get this loan. They kept turning me down. We couldn't get together, because they wanted me to go through a bank to do it, and then they would guarantee the loan. Well, I didn't need them to guarantee the loan. I was looking for this direct loan, which they should have told me right off. We aren't doing those anymore. But this guy I kept getting these turned down letters. Well, in the meantime, I went to a friend of mine, Ted Morris, Millie. He was a draftsman, and he'd been building buildings, and he built Bob's building, and I had gone to high school with him, and we were old acquaintances. And I went to him one day in January, and I'd gotten and when I went out of business, it was about in February, and then Millie and I moved into this new home. We'd been building it while that summer, and we moved from our apartment. We'd moved to Omaha in the summer of '71. And we had we started building this home, and we moved in March of '73, right after we went out of business. And I really didn't know what I was going to do, so I decided to go to real estate school. That seemed to be a good thing to do. So the back of my mind, I was still going to build this big hardware store and build this building, but I was just I was 54 years old at the time, and I was 53, and I was just kind of not knowing what to do, and I needed something to do. I wasn't financially able at the time to retire, and didn't want to retire. I'd been looking at these big True Value stores, and we'd already belonged to this group out of Chicago called Cotter and Company, and they had started these more or less co-op. Was sort of like the United Food was in Omaha, where there was a dealer-owned organization, and there was none of these big stores in this area. Ace hadn't come in, and we were the same type of store that Ace was. they were trying to talk us into the Ace dealers. The Ace people heard about us, and they wanted us to belong to Ace. But in the meantime, we had already been affiliated with True Value because this Cotter and Company had bought out the True Value company in Chicago, and so we were buying from them already in our old store. Anyway, I went to Ted Morris, and he says, "Why don't you make up your mind and go? Let's just go ahead and do it." And I said, "All right." Well, that's how I more or less decided to build this new store. We had room for about 20,000 square feet, which was a big store in those days. And so he laid out, and we built this down on 29th and Broadway. I'd already had the land. As I say, Ben Selden had sold it to me the previous couple of years, and I later thanked him for his foresight. He was the only real estate person in Council Bluffs that grabbed onto this urban renewal. He was. There are other guys, they were asleep at the switch. They didn't know, not because they didn't come to me, but because they didn't anticipate and have any idea what was about to happen. And so we put this out for bids, and we started on it in the spring of, let's see, this was 74. And it was, we had a couple of buildings there. I had to kick out a couple of tenants, and there was people that had a concrete mixing place there. I had to give him a warning that he was about to leave, and it left the place in a real shambles. It was like a scrap iron yard almost. Some of the location was. It was an old. It wasn't like a new shopping center where they buy farmland. I mean, this was old ground on West Broadway, the oldest part of Council Bluffs, and the blue collar area. But Walgreens was already on the corner, and the First National Bank was practically in our parking lot with a drive-through, and Mort Ives was about to open up a new Village Inn right in our front yard, you might say. In fact, he got a piece of property that I should have bought, but I didn't. And he had some of the property, and we eventually shared a parking lot, in which they're doing to this day. And so the location turned out to be okay, very good for us. If I had to do it over, I would have picked the same location. Anyway, we built this store, and Millie started working there also. She had, our two children were gone at the time. I think John was a senior in law school at the time. He had graduated from Vanderbilt, and then he went to Creighton Law School, and he was about to graduate from Creighton Law School, and he decided at the time that he wanted to be a lawyer instead of going into the business, even though that he'd grown up in it and liked the business. And so Millie started coming to the store, and she had nothing else to do, and she enjoyed it, and so we more or less were in this together. Not more or less, we were in it together. And so we finally got it open in November of 74, and we had a grand opening finally in May, but it was successful, and from the day one, it was one of the top 25 True Value stores in the United States out of 6,000 stores, and we had a great experience for the next 25 years there, and we finally sold it out in 1995 to the Easter family of Des Moines, who had other True Value stores, and they also had owned 12 Super Value grocery stores in Iowa, which they sold out, and had an interest in the Iowa Cubs baseball team, and also also a bank and a trucking company, but they are still operating it in a different way. And the manager was today worked for us. I had hired him as a young man and used to take him on buying trips. Anyway, Millie and I had a great experience, and I had been on there. I'd been on the advertising committee in Chicago, and True Value was flourishing during the period that we were there. They later ran into not such hot times, and we were lucky enough to be there before Walmart and Menards and Home Depot and Lowe's and all of them came to this area. And so they had just come, and when we sold out, Walmart had just been in Concept Plus for a year or so, and Menards had just been there for a year. Target had come to the new shopping center, but they were on a different part of town and didn't seem to affect us that much. We were in a blue-collar district, and we got our old customers flocked back to us, and we had a very nice 25 years in that business. And the during the years that we decided to go back into the retail business, or never really left it except for those several months while we were building our new building, and had to get out in a hurry out of the store uptown. We had literally sold out everything, but in the meantime we had bought this property, and there was an old building there, and I moved a bunch of some leftover stock, which was nothing, and a desk or two, and down to this West Broadway location, and had a little. I opened up what I called a Broadway discount, where we already were signed up with True Value, and I would take lawnmowers in that summer, but I just tried it for a short time, and if I didn't feel like being there, I was the only one there, and I didn't do anything with it. That was really not worth anything, and so I literally closed that right away, and we just waited and watched the new building go up, and I had my office over there, and watching the building go up and kind of waiting for it to happen. And as I say, we got in November, and there was a alley in front of us there on between 29th and 30th Street, which was really First Avenue in Concept Bluffs, and our store was sitting behind it, and they hadn't even paved it the week before we opened the business, and so we were sweating all this out so we could get the doors open. In the meantime, going back to when our kids were in school, Kay graduated from Central in 1968, and she went to the University of Missouri, and we visited down there several times while she was there, and she graduated in '72. She came back and was going to be a school teacher. And in the meantime, she had started working at and she was working part-time as a sub-teacher. In the meantime, she was working part-time at Nadelson's, and she liked what she was doing well enough to decide that she wasn't going to be a school teacher, and became a buyer at Nadelson's, and stayed there for quite a few years, or several years, and moved to Minneapolis, and became a buyer for a department store up there that eventually went out of business, and she was then a leather buyer for Berman's, who eventually sold out to Wilson's, but she had a great business experience with those companies. In the meantime, she married Bruce Goldstein, and they have two sons, and Aaron is the oldest, and he's 18. He just graduated from high school, and he's going to the University of Wisconsin in the fall. And Danny is 16, and we were lucky enough to go to be their bar mitzvahs and to Aaron's graduation within the last month. And through the years, we've taken lots of vacations with Kay and her family at various places, and Millie and I have spent winters in Longboat Key, Florida, and Kay has come down several times and visited us with her family, and so it's been that unfortunately haven't watched him grow up from day to day, but from what little time we have, it's been we've been very fortunate. And John went to Vanderbilt, graduated from Central in 1970, and then he went to Creighton Law School. As I had said, he decided to go to law school rather than to go into the retail business. And he moved to Denver in the late 80s, and he has a son, Max, who turned 17 in June, and Maddie is 8 years old, and John is married to her Nancy Strata, and he's very happy in Denver, and we get to see them 2 or 3 times a year. Not enough, but that's the way life is. When I was about 74 years old, Millie had been ready for us to get out of that business for quite a while. We tried selling it. We had several prospects, and then we finally were lucky enough to find this company out of Des Moines that already had 4 True Value stores, and Paul Easter, and we sold the business to him. He took it over on April the 1st of 1995. It's been 8 years. We still own the property, the building, and they are still our tenants, which we're very thankful for. And we have been retired more since that time. I started playing golf again, which just a summertime, about once a week, maybe I get in an extra game. That's been okay. I've enjoyed that. I'm still enjoying it. We've done some traveling. We've been able to go to Florida each winter, and we spend about a month down there. And we've taken other trips, but not very long trips. Not done as much as we probably thought we might do. And we take a long walk, or a walk at least try to every day, and the time goes very fast. Get a chance to read the paper more thoroughly than I used to, and we still see our friends and go to dinner, and life is good. Thank you.
Harold, is there a message you might like to leave for your children and grandchildren?
Well, I would say that I feel that I have been very blessed in my life with my family, my marriage, my whole life. I've been very blessed with my children and my grandchildren. I was lucky to live long enough to have my see my 4 grandchildren, as I mentioned earlier, and I hope that Millie and I have left a heritage of to them of a good Jewish life, of I don't know what kind of a Jewish life, but I would say of knowing what you are is what I should say, and to hope that they are able to live as good a life and have the blessings in life that we have enjoyed.